we'll do a couple of introductions at the start, 3 different organizations, and then we'll get into what should be a really terrific panel discussion. So thank you very much for coming along. We'll get some appetizers at the end. 6:30 there'll be some wine and some appetizers. I think there's some cool drinks if you need them in between. People may still be coming in through the presentation, but I'm sure we'll make space for them. So we'll kick off with our host here from Platform Houston, Genevieve Simmons.
So, welcome. This is obviously Platform Houston. It's a co-working space. What we focus on is trying to foster innovation, and a couple events coming up that are exactly focused on that is actually tomorrow, MEST, the Medicine, Energy, Space Technology Conference. So what we do is we try and break down those silos and find the intersection before all 4 of those. So if you're interested in that, come talk to me as soon as possible so I can get you signed up. Also next Saturday, we're having the Houston Co-working Symposium. So if you want to get a pulse on what the Houston co-working space and the startup scene is like, please come to that. Thanks.
Okay, David.
Okay. My name's Dave Hansen. I'm the chairman of the MIT Enterprise Forum, and I want to welcome you all here to the program tonight. This is one of 3 programs on social entrepreneurship with essentially the same set of speakers. So people who cannot, we scheduled our main program to be at the Channel 8 TV studio. It has limited seating. So Niall had organized this program here at Platform Houston, and we also have another one at the Bauer Business School tomorrow. Just give you, some of you probably don't know what the MIT Enterprise Forum is. The MIT Enterprise Forum is associated with MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was first started by MIT alums, but today you do not need to be an MIT alum to be part of our organization. And I'm a good example of that. I went to Berkeley, never went to MIT, and I'm the chairman of the MIT Enterprise Forum. There's 27 chapters worldwide that are associated with the Enterprise Forum. The charter of these organizations is to have programs on entrepreneurship, technology, and economics. And we do this with flagship programs like this here tonight. We also have a new venture clinic for startup companies, and then we have networking socials. Next slide. Just give you a preview of some things we have coming up in the MIT Enterprise Forum. We've got a networking social coming up in October. In November, we have Professor Richard Lester from MIT coming in to talk about innovations that are needed for energy. We have a business forecast luncheon. We'll be at the Federal Reserve Bank. We sold this program out last year. We've got a vice president from the Federal Reserve coming in and talking, as well as an economist from Compass Bank. Very good program. And then we have programs coming up on cloud computing and regenerative medicine next year. So we have a lot of, I think, very interesting programs. Niall has been responsible for putting many of these programs together. And I also want to say thank you to our sponsors, because we couldn't do the things we do like here without our annual sponsors. So that gives you a little background on the MIT Enterprise Forum. And I'd like to turn it over to Doug McCullough, who's from the Texas Young Professionals, and he's the chairman there.
Thank you for coming. We're happy to be part of this. We started Texas Young Professionals about 4.5 years ago. I think we're close to about 49,000 members statewide, with about chapters in Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Fort Worth. And we love to participate in events like this. We also have monthly happy hours. We do have a happy hour this Thursday night at a place called Batanga, along with a group called Shell Experts. So particularly if you're in the energy industry or interested in it, it might be a great resource for you as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. My name's Not Henderson, as David mentioned. I'm with the MIT Enterprise Forum, but I'm also with an organization called Ashoka, a member of the Ashoka Support Network. Ashoka is one of the leading social entrepreneurship organizations in the world. And we're very, very privileged this evening to have 3 terrific speakers. Michael Zakaras, who I'll introduce in a moment, is from Ashoka itself, part of the Ashoka organization. Rafael Alvarez is one of the world's leading social entrepreneurs. We're very fortunate to have him here in Houston. I'm very glad that Rafael is able to join us this evening. Rafael is the founder and CEO of a company called Genesys Works, and we'll hear a lot more about that in a few moments. And then we also have Hans Hickler. Hans is a CEO himself for 12 years, 3 different companies across the world, and Hans is also a member of the Ashoka Support Network. and is very active in creating advisory boards and coaching social entrepreneurs. So very fortunate to have a terrific panel. The format will be each of the speakers will speak for 5 to 7 minutes, and then I'll ask a couple of questions to the panel, and then we invite yourselves to participate. It's really for yourselves to ask whatever questions you would like of the panelists here, and they'll be very happy to answer. At the end of the program, we'll have wine and some cheese, and we'll also have some breakout sessions with the 3 panelists, and also we have 2 professors of social entrepreneurship from Houston, who I'll introduce towards the end of the program, and we'll have breakout sessions where you can actually interact with the entrepreneurs in more closer proximity. So that's the lineup. I'll say a few words of introduction for each of the speakers. Michael is the director of the U.S. Venture Program at Ashoka. So Michael really manages the search and selection process for social entrepreneurs for Ashoka in the United States. Michael's previously worked with Ashoka in Ireland and Central Europe, and he's been in selection panels across the world, from Montreal to Warsaw to Istanbul. Michael has a particular interest in social entrepreneurship, which is related to the fields of food, agricultural policy, and criminal justice reform. Michael grew up in Brussels, worked in California wine industry, which I need to learn more about, and has a master's in public policy from the Harvard Kennedy School. So please, let's welcome Michael to the Platform Houston. Why don't you just, Michael, why don't you give your speech, and then I'll introduce each of the speakers in turn. So, great, over to yourself.
Thank you, Niall, and everyone for being here and for hosting this. So yeah, I've been sort of asked to introduce social entrepreneurship briefly, and I'm sure most people in the room are familiar with it. Although if I asked each of you to define it, I'd probably get quite a wide range of definitions. I mean, there's no necessarily right or wrong definition, but I'll kind of give you from Ashoka's take. As Niall said, Ashoka is the world's largest network of social entrepreneurs, with about 3,000 Ashoka fellows in 70 countries. So before we get to definitions, I'd just like to start with a couple of faces, just because this is really all about, it looks a little bit, the image doesn't look very good on this one, but social entrepreneurship is really about people and the extraordinary work that they're doing around the world. So I wanted to throw up, this is Bright Simmons. He's the social entrepreneur and also an Ashoka fellow. He's working in Ghana. And what Bright is doing is addressing the problem of counterfeit medication, which is a huge problem globally. And in Ghana, he estimates that up to 25% of the medicine that comes into the country is either placebo or even worse, it's actually poisonous. So what he's done is he's set up a coding mechanism that people can verify through SMS text messages. It goes to a centralized database and it instantly tells you whether the medicine is authentic or not. And he works with pharmaceutical companies, with local sellers, with local officials, all who have an incentive to get this right. It's a simple, but it's a creative solution that can clean up the global health market and save thousands of lives each year. Let's skip ahead to, in the interest of time, yeah. So this is Bart Weechens. He's a social entrepreneur, and he's here with one of his giant African pouched rats. I hope no one here is afraid of rats, but don't worry, this one won't jump off the screen. So what Bart and his team do is they actually train these rats, which have an acute sense of smell, to detect landmines left over after decades of conflict in East Africa. And the rats are smaller than dogs, they're less likely to set off the mines, but more importantly, they're native species, so they're not susceptible to local diseases. And of course, they're much less expensive than sophisticated electronic equipment. So he and his team have cleared 3 million square meters worth of mines across 3 or 4 countries, and now they're actually training the rats as low-cost, early-stage tuberculosis detectors. So pretty cool stuff. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. So both of them are social entrepreneurs, and there are many others, including Rafael sitting next to me, and all 3 happen to be Ashoka fellows. So the question is, what is a social entrepreneur? And again, you'll get a lot of different definitions, but the way we think about it at Ashoka is, when you see with most large-scale societal change, there's often a person at the beginning without whom that change would not have happened. And that's really what we think about when we think of a social entrepreneur. This is a person who will make it his or her life's mission to solve a particular social problem. And they possess the same skills that we often associate with business entrepreneurs, right? It's innovative thinking, and it's creativity. It's the ability to see your field 5 years ahead of everybody else. It's that tenacity and passion. But they're simply applying it to entrenched social problems. And when Ashoka looks for its fellows, we look across 5 criteria, but it really comes down to 2 fundamental questions. The first is this a new or better way of solving a particular social problem? And the second is, will this person plus this idea be transformative? And so we're really looking for people and ideas that challenge the status quo. This is beyond just programs, right? These are people who are asking, why is the world stuck in this particular way, and how can I unstick it? And so in business, you often hear about disruptive innovations, right? Think of the assembly line, think of Wikipedia. These are the big ideas that have ripple effects across industries, and these are the kinds of people that Ashoka is looking for. You can go ahead and click. It doesn't really matter what kind of organization they lead. Again, by Ashoka's definition, the social entrepreneurs are going to do what makes the most sense to get the job done. And so in this sense, they're both visionaries, but they're deeply practical. They're really concerned about the nuts and bolts. And although it's been interesting over the last 10 years, certainly the number of organizations that are either for-profit or kind of hybrid social enterprises have been growing. And then finally, go ahead and tap, So social entrepreneurs are deeply ethical and empathetic. And empathetic in the obvious sense of, they're motivated to improve the human condition, but also, I think in a lesser known way, which is that empathy really guides good social entrepreneurs as effective problem solvers. In this sense, they're very humble. They go about solving problems by asking questions first. And they craft their solutions in ways that create roles for others in an inclusive way, so that people can actually own the solution and make it their own. And this is it's not rocket science, but you'd be amazed at how many development projects miss this important step. And it's really fundamental for community buy-in and for sustainability. So the field has changed a lot over the last 30 years. Ashoka was founded about the time of the first personal computer in the early 80s. And back then, no one had heard of the term social entrepreneur. And it didn't mean these people didn't exist. They were there, but they didn't have an identity. And more importantly, they didn't have a support network. Most were working evenings and weekends to change the world because they had day jobs. And meanwhile, if you were a business entrepreneur, there was this whole ecosystem set up to help good ideas thrive, right? There were angel investors and venture capitalists, professional networks of all kinds, you name it. And so one of Ashoka founders, the Ashoka founder, Bill Drayton, he had 2 key insights when he started Ashoka. And the first is that business does not have a monopoly on entrepreneurship. And the second is that these social entrepreneurs represent a kind of trapped energy that needs a similar kind of support network to be released into the world. And so that's what Bill Drayton did set out to do when he founded Ashoka. And as I said, we've come a long way. Today there's sort of a wash in buzzwords of various kinds, and if anything, it's hard to keep them all straight. There are many other organizations beyond Ashoka, like the Echoing Greens, the Scholes, the Draper Richards Kaplan, that are set up to both identify social entrepreneurs and help advance those early stage ideas. You've got university curriculum of various kinds, whether it's at the undergraduate level or the business school level, where social entrepreneurship is a component. You even have young fellowship programs where 13, 14, 15-year-olds can get seed financing. So we've gone from social what to, you'll run into 8th graders who, if they're not already calling themselves social entrepreneurs, they'll tell you that they want to be one when they grow up. So it's been quite a change. So we can go to, so that's a very condensed history. And just quickly as I wrap up, a couple of things that we've learned. The first is that we can learn a lot from social entrepreneurs. Sometimes there's this misperception that social entrepreneurs are sort of entrepreneur light, and that they're naive optimists that can that need some sort of lessons in hard reality. And actually, when you see the scope of the challenges that they're taking on, and often the limited resources that they're working with, you realize just how good they are at getting things done. And so all of us across sectors, including public sector and in business, should look to them for guidance, especially as we think about advancing social change in one way or another. Second is that they're more interested in spreading ideas than necessarily spreading programs. And that's an important distinction. Ideas like, for example, the working poor deserve a line of credit and can do a lot with it. Or ideas like we ought to afford the same kinds of rights and dignities to people with disabilities than everyone else. So, and the distinction is important because it affects how you measure success, among other things, right? Your social entrepreneurs are working on a very different time frame. They're often thinking 5, 10, or 20 years out. There's a great story of an Ashoka fellow, David Green, who provides low-cost eye care around the world. He was sitting on a panel like this, and someone asked him, David, it's a social enterprise, and he was asking, what's your exit strategy? And he sort of looked perplexed, and eventually he said, death is my exit strategy. So fellows and social entrepreneurs are in it for the long haul. And the other distinction between ideas and programs is that it's actually good when other people adopt your idea and think that it's their own, because that's a sign of traction. And in fact, one of the ways that we measure fellow success is how many people have independently replicated this fellow's work, because that suggests that it's starting to get into the groundwater, and that's when something can be really transformative. Social entrepreneurs are a highly leveraged investment. They're a good bang for your buck. I mean, if you're out there and you're at a foundation, or if you're a philanthropist, it's hard to think about, people often describe Ashoka and similar organizations as doing social venture capital. And in a sense, that's true, because we're looking and we're supporting and investing in what the world needs as opposed to what we have. And we're doing so through individuals that have incredibly effective and lean organizations. And of course, there's always some element of risk involved, right? Not all these ideas are going to be globally transformative. But I think we all need to be more comfortable with risk, especially people in philanthropy. It's too often that social entrepreneurs are told, look, that's too big a vision. And it's bad that a social entrepreneur going to a foundation is more likely to be told that than a business entrepreneur going to a venture capitalist. And finally, one of the advantages of working with Ashoka and having this incredible alumni network of 3,000 people around the world is that you start to see patterns. You see patterns both within fields, but also across the entrepreneurs themselves. And one of the patterns we've noticed is that a lot of Ashoka fellows who caught that bug early of I can do this. Whether it was starting a newspaper when they were in high school or starting some kind of a recycling program, there's something really invigorating and empowering about leading something and leading a team. And so, and as much as the good work that they're all doing, like Rafael around the world, we can't just rely on these extraordinary individuals if we want a world where solutions are outrunning problems instead of vice versa. And that world requires all of us in Ashoka's lingo to be change makers. And so, especially with young people, this is an opportunity to think about what are the kinds of skills we're really developing in young people, skills like empathy and teamwork and leadership and problem solving, so that we can equip them to be the next generation of change makers. I think that's a key lesson that we've learned from Ashoka fellows. So hope I didn't talk too fast, and it's a lot to squeeze in, but there's a start. Thank you, guys.
Is the microphone working?
Yeah,
well, thank you, Michael. That was a wonderful introduction to the concept of social entrepreneurship. So our next speaker is Rafael Alvarez, who's based in Houston itself. Rafael is the founder and CEO of Genesys Works. Genesys Works is a not-for-profit corporation that it really changes the trajectory of life for underprivileged high school students from really a life that's destined to low-wage, dead-end jobs into one in which they can fully participate in the economic mainstream. And Rafael achieves this by offering students internships with some of the major corporations in America, and we'll hear a lot more about how he does that in a moment. But Rafael started Genesys Works in 2002, and it's grown at 50% per annum over the last 8 years, from serving just 10 students in Houston in 2002. It now serves over 800 students annually in Houston, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Chicago, and I believe now San Francisco. Rafael has been recognized for his work in many different quarters of the world, but he's recognized by Forbes magazine as being one of the world's top 30 social entrepreneurs. So we're deeply honored to have him here today. He's also, Rafael was elected to the Ashoka Fellows in 2006. He is an alum of Texas A&M and has won the Entrepreneurship Leadership Awards from Texas A&M. But he was also recognized by President Obama as an outstanding example of what can be done with social entrepreneurship when the President launched the White House Office of Social Innovation. So we're deeply privileged to have Rafael here with us today, and he'll give us a little bit of an overview of what it feels like to be a frontline social entrepreneur.
Well, as I put this on, I really appreciate having a microphone, because after that Aggie game on Saturday, a little hoarse. Hello. Let me see, can I ask you to turn your screen a little bit so I can see it? I need to know what I'm talking about. Thank you. All right, please advance the slide. Thank you. So people say that your destiny in life depends on which side of the track you were born into. But over the last 12 years, I've learned that this is not quite true. More important than which side of the track a person's born into is which track their life is actually on. And I'm going to show you today how simple it really is to change that trajectory of life for a young person. You see, in 2001, I was a corporate strategist working for a big Fortune 500 company. And as any good professional would do, I served my community, and I was involved in the issues that were more interesting to me, and I was passionate about, and that was youth. One of them was a charter school. Went to a graduation ceremony that summer of 2001 and saw a bunch of kids graduating. They were happy about doing so because they were first in the family ever to graduate from high school. And so I went down to the floor to congratulate them, and I said, wow, that's terrific. So what are you going to do now? And one by one, they said the same thing. They said, I'm just going to continue my job. I said, okay, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a cashier, I'm a hand packer, I work in construction, fast food, whatnot. And I thought, okay, well, these occupations are honest jobs, good for when you're in high school. But what happens when you leave any kind of formal education and you're in that occupation 3-4 years? Well, how in the world can you switch from that into another profession that allows you to live in the economic mainstream? Well, these kids were not. They can't. And so here we go, another generation of poverty. And yet, as I went down to the floor that day and I looked into their eyes, I saw these young kids full of potential. And yet, they didn't know it. They were on a track to a dead end, and they didn't know it. They lived in communities that might just be 10 minutes away from downtown and might even be able to see the skyline from their school. And that, my friends, might as well just be a postcard, because that is not their world. They grow up believing that they can't possibly enter, yet alone succeed in a world like this. They grow up believing that success just means getting any job. A minimum wage job, it doesn't matter, and holding on to that job for a few paychecks and contribute to the family. So as a corporate strategist, I took a look at this and I thought, okay, if I could only take one of these kids and give him the knowledge that he needs to be of value to a corporation, to be a valuable member of a workforce, and give him the opportunity to work in a meaningful internship, not a clerical, not a menial, but a meaningful internship during their senior year in high school for an entire year, and get him to feel like a professional. What difference could that make? And could I actually change the trajectory of life for this kid? Could it be this simple that I could get him to look at himself differently? And could I get his family to look at him differently? I thought it was that simple. Problem is, I had a good job. Had a good job, had a good family. I still have a good family. It's kind of hard to leave that. Still have a good job. I have a better job. I needed a catalyst. And September 11 was that catalyst. A week after September 11, I decided to put my corporate job on hiatus, just a little break, 5 years, I told my wife, go start Genesys work, stay on the board forever, but go back to my corporate job. So I gave up my plush corporate office and I went into a little donated office, which is right there. And the first year I got 10 kids. Boy, that was hard. I mean, becoming a social entrepreneur was not trivial. I remember the first founder I ever met with, and he said, well, we like what you're doing, but do you have a 501c3? And I looked at him and I said, what's that? I mean, I didn't even know what I didn't know. But somehow things started happening. In the second year, we had 20 students. And things were starting to click. And these students were working on these great companies. But let me tell you about one of them. His name is Hector. And Hector came from a community where his only choices in life were, in his words, were to either become a thug or a soldier. So he didn't want to become a thug like the rest of his family. He didn't want to become a drug dealer. So he was just going to go into the armed forces as a soldier. So working at Reliant Energy, he discovered that he could actually be a professional and that there's another path for him. And instead of going that route, he decided to enroll to Texas A&M. And he didn't have it easy. His education had been very deficient. And when the going got tough, and he made a 1.7 GPA that first semester, he thought about quitting. But then he thought about that experience of him being a professional in this corporate world and knowing that he could do it, and knowing why it was that he needed to work twice as hard as everybody else. And he did. Well, a few years ago, he graduated from Texas A&M, and today he's a project manager at Hewlett-Packard, making more than twice as his parents combined. So now, the cycle of poverty in Hector's family has been broken forever, as his younger sister and brother followed his lead, and now they're college graduates as well. That is an example, but we have many more. Lino said, you're off just by a little bit. This year we served 1,000 students. 1,000 students. And take a look at them. These are the students. This is an actual picture, not a stock photo. This is an actual picture of our students. And these students live in the poorest neighborhoods here in Houston. And yet by this experience, they get to discover there is indeed a different track in life. 95% of them are going to college and are succeeding in college when they get there, which it blows away any other statistic. Why? Because they see themselves differently, and that is the innovation. Like Michael said, one time one of our schools said, well, the enrollment in your program has gone down in our school this year. And I said, why was that? He goes, because now the other co-op teachers are starting to compete and they're starting to elevate what an internship ought to be about. And that school, Houston HISD, called me a few years ago and said, we are stopping the practice of sending our kids to McDonald's and calling that an internship. We are stopping that. In order for a kid to get credit, for an internship, it has to be a meaningful internship. And that's where we're starting to change the field. But folks, their lives are not the only ones that have been changed. My life has been changed. Being a social entrepreneur is unbelievable. I deal with the same level of complexity that I ever did in the corporate world. I have incredible amount of challenge and I work harder than I ever worked ever before. Yet, my life is so unbelievably rewarding. I speak to business groups all the time and I say that my life certainly would have been more financially successful had I stayed climbing the corporate world. But I wish I could explain to you how rich my life is because I didn't and because I chose differently. So I want to end with this first slide I spoke about and this picture of this track. And when you first saw this picture, I'm sure your eyes went to the left side of the picture where you saw those tracks, right? But now I want you to look at the right-hand side of the picture. And I want you to see that track switch. And I want you to think about one thing. How little force it actually takes to move this switch. And when you do that at the right time, a train that weighs thousands of pounds, thousands of tons, is going to end up in a whole different city. So as I look into the crowd, I see many of you very young, many of you more experienced, but you all have choices in life about what to do with the rest of your life. And I'm going to ask you a question. Are you passionate about something? And if you are passionate about something, are you actually investing your time, your talent, and your treasure into making a difference in the lives of people? Because you can, and you don't have to quit your job in order to do that. You can by just focusing your attention on what matters most to you. If you are not doing that, you are missing out. You are missing out. I urge you to find what you're passionate about and go the extra mile. Invest the time, invest the resources, because when you do so, your life will be richer. Thank you.
So, fabulous, Rafael, very inspiring words, and thank you very much for those. Our third panelist this evening is Hans Hickler. Hans is the founder and CEO of Ellipsis Advisors, which provides executive-level coaching and advisory services. Hans himself has served as CEO of 3 multinational corporations. Firstly, he was the CEO Asia Pacific for Agility Logistics, which covered 20 countries and 7,000 employees, so you get a sense of the scale. He was also CEO of DHL's Global Customer Solutions business and CEO of APL Logistics. Hans is a recognized leader in logistics and transportation industry, and like the other speakers, he's also received many prestigious awards, industry awards, including the Executive of the Year Award from the Strategic Account Management Association. Hans is also a member of the Young Presidents Organization. Some of you may know it as YPO, and it's basically an organization for those folks who reach CEO before the age of 40, I think it is, of a material-sized company. So very, very lucky to have Hans with us this evening. Hans is also a member of the Ashoka Support Network, which is his direct connection with social entrepreneurship, and he's going to tell us a lot more about what's involved with the Ashoka Support Network and how people can get involved. As part of that, Hans has been very instrumental in creating a thing called advisory boards, which are really there to support frontline social entrepreneurs. And I hope you get a chance to ask Hans about his experience and how people can become involved in those advisory boards, which are very supportive of the front line. Of particular interest to Hans is the concept of empathy in business. And Hans does a lot of work in that domain of how we embed the concept of social profit into businesses as opposed to financial profit. So look forward to hearing a little bit about that. Hans is a graduate of Brown University in the US, so not Texas, but we're delighted to have Hans with us this evening and look forward to your comments.
Thanks. You can switch to the next slide. So that basically, all of us at Ashoka believe that each one of us can become a change maker. And if we don't become change makers, then the world will look the same as it does today. And the bottom of the pyramid has over 3 billion people of underprivileged and underserved people, and that's not a world we want to live in. And I always say that, you can see, by the way, I'm really pissed at you, Niall, for putting me after him, because it's a really hard thing to follow. But I always tell people, I haven't had a good idea, or I'd be a social entrepreneur, so I'm the second best thing. I'm an executive that tries to do everything I can to help them be more successful. And the Ashoka Support Network is really that. We're a group of about 400 CEOs and executives that are available to the fellows, to the entrepreneurs, to help them with anything. A lot of these fellows have supply chain issues. They'll call a guy like me because I've been in the supply chain world. Or it may be something as simple as putting together an investor deck for a foundation or helping build a business plan. It runs the gamut. But those of us, and this is sort of the message, you can take one thing away. If you're in the business world and think that you don't have a lot to offer these people, you're wrong. And for me, what I learned is, I can write a check and feel good for a day, or I can figure out that the things that I do every day from 9 to 5 in running a business are hugely valuable to social entrepreneurs. They've started out and they're running businesses in a much more difficult business environment than those of us who are working for a company that's listed on the stock exchange. And so simple things like mentorship, thought partnership, perspective, those kinds of things, that's what I do. Like I said, I haven't had the bright idea, but I can sure give my opinion about his idea a lot. Throughout my presentation, you'll see some pictures. They're all with work with a social entrepreneur called Vera Cordero. She works in Rio de Janeiro, and she helps women that live in the slums who have chronically sick children and pulls them from misery to sustainability. And it's a 2-year program called a Family Action Plan, where she gives them help with psychological help, legal help, medical help, teaches them a profession. And when these women come out, something like 98% of them are standing on their own feet with no social help, with a profession, and able to help their kids. Her work has become social policy in 5 states in Brazil. She's an amazing woman. She's helped 15,000 of these women. And this is one of the women that I helped. This is a favela, a slum in Rio. That particular slum has over 120,000 people in 1 square kilometer. And so if you think you've got it tough every once in a while, you ain't seen nothing yet. And I love going down there, go down every 2 months to help Vera. Next slide, please. Ashoka Support Network is basically a group of people. I don't know how I got in this group, but most of them are pretty good business people and successful, who share Ashoka's belief that entrepreneurs are a primary engine for social change. There's 300 of us all over the world. And I help people in South Africa, in England, in Rio de Janeiro, in Houston. It doesn't really matter. The network can tap into me as they can to Nile anywhere around the world. Next slide. So the opportunity really is, like I said, the things we do every day are hugely valuable to these entrepreneurs. And really the goal is for us to help them be better leaders. So I left that logistics world. I'm no longer CEO of a global company. I started my own business, and I'm a coach and an advisor to CEOs, Fortune 500 companies, mid-cap companies, entrepreneurs, and through Ashoka, social entrepreneurs. And it's all one and the same thing. They're all trying to create more impact, scale their business model. And those of us who have been through the executive world or are living it can really add a lot of value to that. Those of us in the Ashoka network also are part of this group of 300 executives who have this like-minded vision that we can really help make a change. And one of the things that I do is I travel all around the world talking to people like you to help you understand that social entrepreneurship is not that different from what we do. In fact, the whole concept of shared value is all about understanding how our business imperatives can actually drive change. And as a coach, I often take social entrepreneurs like Rafael, and I fly them up to New York and have a nice bottle of wine and a dinner with one of my clients, because his perspective will be so different than my client who's running his business and doing nothing else but living the business world. So in many cases, that's also what I do with Ashoka. I bring my business perspective into Rafael's world, and by doing that, by creating that thought partnership, hopefully we can accelerate the business model. Next slide, please. There's a ton of ways to engage, and Ashoka is just one of them. So Michael told you, it's not who you engage with, it's how you engage. But if you believe that people can make a change, and if you have any question about that, the Dalai Lama said that if you don't think one person can make a difference, tell that to a mosquito. So the point is, there's many ways to engage. You just have to want to. In Ashoka, when I started as an ASN member 5 years ago, I just gave about 2 hours, 3 hours a month of my time. A fellow would call me up and say, I need help with a business model issue. But over time, we created this concept in Miami called advisory boards. At YPO, we have a concept called Forum, where 6 of us CEOs get together every month for 4 hours. And we introduced the Forum concept to Ashoka. And basically, with Vera, she has an advisory board of myself and 4 of my YPO CEO colleagues in Miami. And we meet once every month, every other month. And rather than having a one-on-one relationship with a fellow, that fellow now has a board of 4 or 5 CEOs, each with different experience, each with a different network. And the opportunity for that entrepreneur is multiplied because they've got access to our network and our thought partnership. And this concept of advisory boards really allows us to scale improvement and success and scaling of our fellows' business models. We've created an investors club where many of us CEOs who are also ASNers, we are early stage investors in entrepreneurs. And of course, because of our affiliation with social entrepreneurship, we have a heart for social entrepreneurs who also need money. So we've created an investors club within the ASN community so that our money, if the business model is right, gets channeled to ASN fellows. And within Ashoka, there's many more initiatives other than just supporting a fellow. There's a concept of universities get certified as changemaker universities. We have a youth venture program where Ashoka funds and sponsors and supports 16 to 20-year-olds who've got social entrepreneurship ideas. And so as ASNers, some of my colleagues are much more involved in youth venture or Ashoka universities. Others are more involved with the fellows like myself. Next slide. My story is pretty simple. I joined in 2008. I introduced Ashoka at a YPO event. And 3 years later, my YPO chapter, more than 50% of us are involved in social entrepreneurship in Ashoka. Our kids have interned there. In 2010, we created the first advisory boards. And I sort of had a life change 2 years ago. I quit that job, and one of the reasons I did that was I wanted to spend more time giving back to the social entrepreneurs, and I spend about 40 to 50% of my time now supporting Ashoka Fellows, working on the Empathy Initiative. I'm very involved in the social inclusion initiatives, and I'm trying to get an annual conference of social inclusion started in Rio de Janeiro. So many of us, Niall himself, we go down that road, and it starts with 2 hours a month, and many Ashoka Support Network people stay that way, 2 or 3 hours a month. But some of us, we really get the bug, and we change our life and rope our wives in. My wife Teresa's over there, and she follows me around the world and watches me do what I do, and is very actively engaged with Ashoka as well. Next slide. So I made this career decision. I went deep with Ashoka. There's no getting out, and my goal is to stop working altogether and dedicate all my time to these Ashoka Fellows. There's 3,000 of them and only 300 of us, so a lot of my effort is recruiting more business people to help these fellows. We launched an annual summit. We just had the second annual summit in London, where we get together with the fellows and we drive key agenda items of how we can be more effective. And I do things like this to share the message. There's Vera and me and her team walking through the favela on our way to visit a couple of the mothers. And I tell you what, you're absolutely right. I've gotten so much more out of this than I give in. It's the most rewarding thing I've done in my life. And I just want to do more of it and really, really feel like I'm making a difference. And each one of these 3,000 fellows is changing the world with sustainable business models. And to be a part of that is just an unbelievable experience. And that's it. Again, another picture of me with one of the mothers there. It's just an incredible experience, and if there's anything I can do to introduce any of you to the world of helping these people, you won't regret it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll restrict myself to one question to each of the speakers. I could spend the entire evening asking questions, but I'd like to give yourselves a chance. But I just want to pick up on Hans' very last point there. He just mentioned sustainable business. So I'd like to ask Rafael, how do you make a social business a sustainable business?
So the question is, how does a social enterprise become a sustainable business? And there's two ways to answer that. And I'm going to give you both answers. We think of sustainability as financial sustainability. We charge for the services students provide. So when a student is in an internship, they're official employees of ours. And we charge an amount that companies are happy to pay because they're getting value from the student. And that allows us to fund 75% of the enterprise. So this year, Genesys Works is about an $11 million organization, and about $7.5 million come from earned income, which is pretty nice because it literally is an annuity. Every month we know it's going to come in. That's a benefit compared to many other nonprofit organizations. But in a more general sense, those that don't have the benefit of earned income call sustainability a mechanism by which revenues come in a sustainable way. So an organization that has a very robust individual philanthropy with individuals that give to the organization year in and year out, they can consider that sustainable as well. Michael, I don't know what your definition for sustainable enterprise would be.
I wish Ashoka had an annuity. That's my. Yeah, I mean, just very briefly. I mean, it's as I said, the number of organizations that we do see that are bringing in some kind of an earned income has been growing, and I think that's terrific. And I think part of it is that social entrepreneurs, like I mentioned, they'll go to foundations and they actually find it more difficult to raise money or capital there than in the private markets. And so part of it's just a question of flexibility and where the money is for what they're trying to do. I do think it's important to realize that not every idea or every organization or strategy can figure out an income generation model. If we all could make Girl Scout cookies, that'd be terrific, and sell them and bring in hundreds of millions. But there are some ideas, again, whether it's extending sort of disability rights or it's very hard to sort of do deal making and to have products and to sell those products or sell So sometimes the conversation gets a little bit stuck in the social enterprise bubble, which I think is a really great and growing component of social entrepreneurship. But I think social entrepreneurship, at least as we can see it, is a slightly larger category, and so sustainability can have sort of a larger definition. But yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Oh,
No, please.
Is anybody, there's nonprofits, and I'm hearing more about these certified B corporations. And is anybody working as a certified B corporation? And can you shed some light and/or advice, please, if that's the case?
There are B Corps have been growing at a steady pace, which is great. For those of you who aren't familiar, getting certification as a B Corporation just means that your corporate charter, there are certain requirements. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but it's that move from shareholder to stakeholder responsibility. And there's now hundreds of B Corps, some quite well. Patagonia is one, Method Cleaning Products is another one. So they really run the gamut. There are some Ashoka fellows and social entrepreneurs who have registered. One is called Revolution Foods. They're working to bring nutritious school food. They're actually a for-profit model, and they're spreading across the country at a rapid pace. So it's those are actually for-profit companies. So it's a little bit distinct from nonprofits, but they're for-profit companies who are taking that additional step and saying we have a responsibility to the community, to the environment, to our workers, and we're going to raise the bar and hope that others follow in that. And I think it's terrific because that's another role that corporations have to play if we're going to fix a lot of these problems.
Thank
If you're interested, walk over to Kirby Drive, which is a 5 minutes.
Yeah, we know
You'll
that.
see a certified B corporation in operation.
Okay. I've been preempted. Other questions from the audience?
Well, actually, I want to carry on that because it's really important to realize the fundamental shift in the fact that for-profit corporations now can become, and call themselves social enterprises, and I think that's fantastic.
Could you do something like you do if you were a B Corp and not a nonprofit, being the laws being the way
Yes,
they are?
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. If we were profitable enough to be a for-profit corporation, absolutely, we could, and would even have more access to capital. So our growth would be even better. And it's socially acceptable now to have a for-profit social enterprise, and it's growing, and it's just fantastic. Jim Collins, which I'm sure you guys all read, I think it was one of his books. He talked about the tyranny of the or, and he talked about companies having to decide between profit or purpose, right? And how he calls it the tyranny of the or because it's not or. You can have both purpose and profit, and that happens in the individual level. I mean, you can be a coach, and you can be a for-profit coach and do good. And I think that people that are not advanced in their thinking, like they look at, sometimes they get questions that crack me up. Like, you mean you make margin on your students? Well, that's wrong. And I'm like, God, well, I'm not sure I can even address that.
Yeah, the whole concept of the triple bottom line, right? So business people, this is why I always talk about, I become a better leader by working on the social side, because the leaders of tomorrow are the empathetic leaders, people that care about their communities and leaving their communities in a better place than they came in. Empathetic leaders are going to attract the talent of tomorrow. The students that are coming out of university today care about the kinds of people they work for, the kinds of companies they work for, the social missions. So this concept of the triple bottom line, people, profit, and planet, is a really important concept, and it's tied to the whole issue of shared value, the ability of how can I figure out whether the product or service that I provide as a business can also create social change. 3M is a great concept. They make mosquito netting, they sell that mosquito netting, and they're curing malaria, you know? So, you know, they weren't in the business of social change, but they figure out, and each one of us can figure that out. You know, in Asia, we had in our business plan that we would create a school for women in every one of the 22 countries that we served. I'm a logistics business, but we're in communities in every country, and we need to have an obligation to be a leader that cares about bringing people, those communities up, even while I'm just moving freight from A to B. So that concept is hugely important, and the ownership of the social agenda and of social change of business leaders is really important. And as business leaders, when we work with social entrepreneurs, we learn that world and we bring that back into this concept of social entrepreneurship. How do we create that conscience within our businesses and the ownership that we have to be part of making that change?
Other questions? No questions? Yeah, okay.
You talked a lot about the role of philanthropy and social enterprise. I'm interested in the intersection of social entrepreneurship and the emerging field of social finance. And I'm wondering if any of you are using some of these new tools of social finance, things like social impact bonds, for instance, or the newest iteration for those of us who work internationally, development impact bonds, and what you think about them. Are they tradable? Is there going to be a market for them? Are they the key to sustainability and scalability so that we can really have impact? What do you think about them and are you using them?
Maybe paraphrase the question. So the question is really about the intersection of social finance with social entrepreneurship and are social impact bonds tradable, fungible in the market, and what's the future for?
Yeah. So I guess first we have to define what social impact bonds means, and I guess it also has a couple different definitions, but the one that I know is imagine a government is going to pay for results. There's also a linkage between that and pay for performance. So let's just say the government is tired of funding programs that show no results, but you have a small program and you're promising incredible results. And so the government is going to say, well, for every outcome you get, at the end of the outcome, I'll give you $100,000 because that's the cost avoidance that you create to society and whatever. And so you multiply that by X amount, and so we promise to give you $100 million if you pull this off. Well, but only if you pull this off. So then the entrepreneur will go to an investor and say, Hans, you know, you've been successful, you know, but you're not Bill Gates, right? But you might have $1 million that could could I issue a bond to you for $1 million? You trust me to carry on this thing, and you know that at the end of the day, when I succeed, I'm going to get $100 million from the government. So I'm selling you this bond. You're going to get your money back with interest, nominal interest.
Well, you get the 99?
Exactly.
Sounds like a good deal.
Well, no,
Put my social hat on then, all right.
Yeah, no. The point is, you know, a social impact bond is a way by which an entity, a foundation, an individual can make an investment and expect to see that investment back, you know, but it carries a certain amount of risk.
Yeah.
But this opens the field for us in an unbelievable way, because now we have access to capital that we didn't have before. Now we have access to be able to go to this, you know, venture capital firms, huge foundations, and say, you will see a return on your investment, so you can in turn invest it somewhere else, but you got to take the risk with us. And so that's kind of what it is. Yes, I think there's a lot more happening about social investing. There's a huge conference, it was last week, or SOCAP in San Francisco. Marco and I were there together in that conference. A lot happening in that field, and I think it's extremely exciting.
Okay. David? Question here and then at the back.
Okay, how important are governments for funding social entrepreneurship? Or do you really want the governments to be involved?
Well, since I went to the Kennedy School of Government, yes. I mean, you know, one of the interesting things about social impact bonds is that it's figuring out a way to marry the three sectors, right? And you get the capital of the private sector, you get the scale of the public sector. and you get the innovation and the creativity that's coming from the social entrepreneurs, because it's unfortunately often not from government where you get that innovation and creativity, but it's very hard without the public sector, I think, to reach the kind of scale that you can reach and that we need to reach. So that's, and I think we're right on sort of the cutting edge of some of these kinds of financial instruments, and it could open up, as you say, a lot of interesting possibilities. So yeah, I think there's definitely a role for government. The White House, there's now a White House Office of Social Innovation. They're sort of releasing certain funds and seeing it as a way of sort of upfront investing in community improvements, in trying to unearth, just the way like Ashoka is doing, what are some of the promising ideas. I think certainly there's room for the public sector to notice what is working in a particular city or in a particular state or country, and then work to adopt that more broadly. And what I mentioned before, that one of the ways we assess fellow success and progress is around independent replication of ideas. One of the other ones is this idea affecting national policy in some way, in the way that Vera Cordero has affected policy across Brazil. And so there was a fellow in Bangladesh who was working for more than 10 years to provide women who are working in garment factories the opportunity to leave during periods of the day and actually breastfeed their kids and sort of, and also have sort of child care facilities. This was all run by her NGO. And her most successful day was when her organization closed down, because what she was doing became national policy and a requirement in Bangladesh. And so that's another thing we forget about when we measure success only by size of your budget, size of your staff. In the end, that was her end game. It was that I can close down because now the government has adopted it.
Can I add a couple of things to that? So in the example of Vera in Brazil, many of the NGOs are affiliated with corruption stories. So there's just been a long-standing issue of somebody in the government pays an NGO and the NGO puts it back in their pocket. So in Vera's case, she decided she wasn't going to accept government money. And in her fundraising effort in Brazil, that was a really important thing to do. Having said that, her work has become public policy in 5 states. So she works very much with the public sector to do that. So there's a difference between money and engagement. And I think it matters a lot what environment you're launching your enterprise in. But this is the other reason I want to create this global conference of social inclusion, because that will include private sector, public sector, social sector, medical sector, academia, as a platform to discuss agendas for social change. So there's a lot of ways that the government needs to be involved. There's a lot of ways for that scaling that needs to happen. But in some cases, unfortunately, in some of the places where our fellows work, you have to understand the pragmatic realities of that. And there'd be nothing worse to Vera's brand of serving 15,000 women than a corruption scandal because she got money from one entity that wasn't clean. So a lot of this is the kind of stuff these people face, and this is the kind of stuff we help them with, is really understanding what are these risk trade-offs. Because at the end of the day, they're managing a brand, and the whole house of cards could fall over because of one simple thing.
Question?
I apologize, I came a bit late, so this might have been covered in Michael's presentation, but when an executive from outside of social entrepreneurship, as they try to translate their skills and their experience to social entrepreneurship, what are the greatest challenges that they likely face?
Just the man to ask right here.
The challenges of a business person translating those skills to social entrepreneurs.
And are you thinking, is your question about you becoming a social entrepreneur, or you helping a social entrepreneur with your business skills?
In particular, helping social entrepreneurs. But you can answer the question.
Never mind. It's the other.
I'd love to actually hear, ideally, from both Rafael and Lino.
Okay, we'll take it off.
Okay, well, so in terms of what are the things that we as business people typically will help a social entrepreneur with, it can run the gamut. Think of, a CEO of a big business and the direct reports they have, operations, logistics, human resources, marketing, sales, add fundraising to that money, so that's the finance side. So it just depends. With one entrepreneur, I may be working with them very deeply on creating a supply chain model. With the next one, I'm helping them working with their team on talent management. How do we scale the team to anticipate growth? We spend a lot of time helping with fundraising, helping work with boards and investors, growth strategies. Typically, think of them not having a lot of experience, or if they have deep experience in one thing, they don't have deep experience in all of the facets of being a CEO. And they're also mired in the day-to-day. His business is helping people. His business, if I can make it easier for him to spend less time running the company because of my input and perspective, he's spending more time helping kids get on a different track. And so that's really the objective here, is for us as business people to give our years of experience and not allow them to make mistakes, or have them get out of the muck a little bit and say, look, you're worried about 1,000. In 3 years, you're going to be supporting 3,000. Let's talk about how your organization needs to change, how much money you need to raise, how your financial model will change, how your infrastructure will change, how the team you have to build changes, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And so my side of the answer from this perspective, the biggest mistake you can make is think that you're some sort of magician that's going to come in 15 minutes of listening to my problem, you're going to tell me something I haven't thought about already. Now, if you're a specialist on some area that I'm not, that might happen, but it takes an investment of time to understand what the challenges are. That's why Hans spends 50% and not 5% of his time, right? Folks, and I used to be one in the corporate sector. I was on boards, and I'm thinking that just going to a meeting once a quarter, and all of a sudden I have this brilliant idea and solution. And the reality is that the challenges that we face in social enterprise are quite as bit as complex as anything in the corporate world. I mean, our CRM installation of Salesforce.com, we invested tens of thousands of dollars and tons of time, and it's a pretty sophisticated installation. Our IT, I mean, we have servers and we support 1,000 computers. We have, I mean, we run some of the state-of-the-art virtual, technology systems, whatever. And so that's again what the danger that you could make is underestimating how what we already have going.
Any other questions? We've still got a few moments. Well, let's see, you've had one. Any others? No.
There's one over there.
Yes, please.
So, because the things that you do have impacts that you can't really observe, say you're not generating revenues or anything like that, you're helping change people's lives, how do you establish a metric in order to measure your impact, in order to attract investment and grow, and hopefully end up in the scale of a corporation one day?